Hello, my name is Sarah, and welcome to the last video of our Transgender Allyship series. Today we're going to be talking about gender dysphoria versus euphoria. So to kind of start things off, you may have heard this term before, dysphoria. You may have not. You may have heard it in a more general sense being used. Today we are focusing specifically on gender dysphoria and what it means in the context of trans identities and non-binary identities. So to start things off, just a quick definition. So when I'm talking about dysphoria, I'm referring to discomfort or distress that is related to discrepancies that one feels between their gender identity and the sex they were assigned at birth, often linked to specific sex-related characteristics. So it's important to note that not all trans and non-binary people experience dysphoria the same way. Some don't even experience it at all, but most will and most do at some point. Looking at some statistics of what we do know about the prevalence in binary trans people, around 73 to 78% experience it by age 7. So it's something that people experience pretty early on. They may still come to kind of experience it first later in life. Either way, it's a very, very common experience. And while it is a very common experience, it can look a lot of different ways. So for different people, it can present different ways, it can spark different feelings, and it's really important to understand that there's no kind of blanket, this is what dysphoria looks like. So going a little bit further into some of the general types of dysphoria someone might experience, there's kind of 3 categories where we put different forms of dysphoria. The first one is body dysphoria. So this is kind of what most people tend to think of when they think of gender dysphoria. It's that distress specifically linked to sex-related physical characteristics or just physical aspects of how someone looks. Going forward, the next one that some are familiar with, or maybe you've kind of seen this in different ways, is social dysphoria. So that's distress relating to how other people perceive one's gender and fears around being misgendered by others. So this can be something more of how other people see me and how other people interact with me, as opposed to body dysphoria that's a lot more of how I see my physical self. The last one, which is probably the least known when we're talking about dysphoria, is cognitive dysphoria, sometimes referred to as mind dysphoria. And this is distress relating to one's own perception of their gender, sometimes including using misgendering language towards oneself, having just misgendering thoughts towards themselves. It's a lot more of kind of what's going on internally when you perceive your gender. So what does it look like? Like I kind of talked about before, it can look a lot of different ways. One thing that is important, though, when we're talking about gender dysphoria and how it relates to mental health and wellness, is gender dysphoria in and of itself is not a mental illness, but experiencing it can be linked to conditions such as anxiety, depression, substance use, eating disorders, and self-harm. Dysphoria can also contribute to things like lower self-esteem, dropping out of school, unemployment, and relationship conflict. So while it isn't something inherently of itself a mental illness, it can be linked to a lot of aspects that impact our mental wellness. So what causes it? We don't have a very clear picture of what causes dysphoria versus what doesn't. Generally, a lot of theories kind of go on the idea of there being a combination of some kind of genetic predispositions and environmental factors being probably a huge one. In the previous video, I talked about this idea of minority stress theory, which is a psychological model that proposes that adverse mental health outcomes in minoritized groups are linked not to the groups inherently being predisposed to poor mental health, but rather the experiences of discrimination and prejudice leading to poorer health outcomes. And I mention this because it's possible that dysphoria is another product of the minority stress model. Experiences of discrimination and lack of affirmations towards one's gender identity is a potential cause for dysphoria and can definitely lead to stronger experiences of dysphoria. So knowing kind of what may cause it, what may increase it, on the other hand, what decreases it? What are ways to work with the dysphoria and kind of help resolve some of it. So one of the major ones that we point to is transitioning. Transitioning can be a super, super powerful tool in decreasing dysphoria, either through surgery, hormone treatment, or other kind of like social transitions. While not everyone who experiences dysphoria desires medical interventions, many experience benefits from medical transition as a way to lower dysphoric thoughts and feelings. Another really important avenue is talk therapy. Talk therapy can be a helpful treatment for those experiencing some form of dysphoria. Therapists can do anything from guiding their clients in processing their dysphoria and their dysphoric feelings, and to also challenging some of these distorted thought patterns around identity. Can look a lot of different ways, but that is another helpful zone to just kind of work through the mental aspects of it. Another super, super, super important one, of course, all of these are, but to kind of come at it from the angle of an ally, is support from loved ones. Having loved ones that affirm someone's gender can really decrease the distress related specifically to social dysphoria, and also it ties into all these other forms by having that outside affirmation of one's own gender. So in dialogue around how to support our trans loved ones, we often focus on gender dysphoria, and many of us may not even be aware of the opposite of dysphoria, which we call gender euphoria. So gender euphoria can be understood broadly as the joy, satisfaction, and or excitement one experiences when they feel affirmed in their gender identity. While this may be a new term to many of us, this phrase has actually been along for a long while. It was coined as early as the late 70s by members of the trans community. So euphoria can take on similar types like dysphoria. There's a lot of parallel kind of types that come up, including body euphoria. So body euphoria is felt when a person feels comfort in their physical body. This can be a result of medical transitions, like we talked about before, that being something that decreases dysphoria and inversely also increases euphoria. Can be changes in how gender is expressed, so maybe not a physical intervention like a medical type intervention, but maybe it's a change in how someone dresses or someone presents themselves, how they do their hair, their makeup, anything like that. It can be increased also just around comfort and acceptance around one's own body. Maybe it's not making changes as much as working towards ideas like radical acceptance around this is my body, this is what it does, this is what it looks like. All of these can lead to that body euphoria. The next one is social euphoria. Again, parallel to the different types of dysphoria. Social euphoria occurs when a person feels validated by those around them in their identity. So usage of correct names, pronouns, and overall being included in affirming spaces and conversations, all of this can contribute to social euphoria. Last but not least is cognitive euphoria. And similar to cognitive or mind dysphoria, cognitive euphoria happens when a person feels a positive internal view towards themselves and their gender identity. So fostering a sense of pride towards one's identity as opposed to shame can be crucial for establishing cognitive euphoria. So in summary, kind of touching upon this idea of euphoria, dysphoria, and a lot of the things that we've talked about today, as allies, we need to see our trans and non-binary loved ones not only in their dysphoria, but also in their euphoria. In any sort of allyship, whether it's related to gender or not, it's critical not to develop an image of minoritized folks as someone that needs our saving, but rather someone that just needs support in their own work, someone that needs those ways that their own work can be lifted up. Understanding both dysphoria and euphoria helps to paint a more nuanced picture of our loved ones. They're not victims that need to be saving. They're not any kind of image like that. They're people that we need to support in their good times and their bad times. We can help promote mental health in our trans loved ones and communities by engaging in a lot of the allyship strategies we've discussed throughout this series. So anything from like using correct language, pronouns, educating ourselves on different ways that gender comes into our language. Sometimes it's just generally educating ourselves, learning about the community, learning about history, learning about all of these aspects of trans identity, queer identity, whatever it may be. and showing empathy and love to those around us. Going to those basic kind of skills of active listening, being a support system, doesn't always have to be knowing exactly what to say, as much as being present and being willing to listen. So I want to thank you for joining me throughout this series on trans allyship. I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to continue engaging with any of the resources I discussed throughout the series, as well as any other resources you find. Allyship is a process. It is not a title. It is something you're always doing, you're always working towards. So to kind of end off this video, a couple other great resources to continue your education, find more resources, find more things to engage with, include the National Center for Trans Equality, which you can find at transequality.org. That's transequality.org. Trans Families, which is geared specifically to like trans loved ones, trans family members. That's transfamilies.org, transfamilies.org. Trans Student Educational Resources. This is at transstudent.org, transsstudent.org. So it's two S's back to back in that one. And the last one that is a little bit more of a general resource on education throughout the LGBTQ plus community, which is the Safe Zone Project. That is thesafezoneproject.com. So THESAFEZONEPROJECT.com. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.